Bitcoin maturing, it's really interesting. When you look back like 10, 15 years where Bitcoin was, it's basically non-existing. It was like a small, maybe even like nerdy cypherpunk asset. And today we're here with big institutions, with presidents and everything going on. So I think that's the main conversation, the main direction where we want to take it today. In the first round, I want to just get the current state, where you think the speakers it is, and maybe give us some small introduction to yourself so the people get to know you guys. Take it away, Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire. By day, I'm a commodities trader, and by night, I'm a financial astrologer, and always a Bitcoiner. So, yeah, I think the adoption of Bitcoin is really, really interesting. I think that we have moved from a point where it was a nerdy asset and it was super high risk. It was, nobody knew whether Bitcoin would survive or work as a project. And now it's the 5th largest asset in the world. And so I just think that that's a really interesting trajectory. And for anybody who thinks, am I too late to Bitcoin? Or, that's past. I should have gone in 15 years ago. It's not. It's just that the risk profile has completely changed. And so you're able to invest in something that is probably going to last till next year, so and beyond. So that's really where we're at in adoption.
Great, thank you. And so my name's Paul Rogers. And I think it's a fascinating topic because many of us may be just starting our Bitcoin journey. So we're infants in this process, and others may be quite senior in it. But Bitcoin as an asset class is also going through that. There was that old video game Pac-Man. I think it's retro cool now. But many people haven't even put their quarter in the machine to start playing it, and yet many others have been gobbling up those little sats for years, and many others are playing 3 or 4 or 5 levels deep, and that's where we are seeing the exchange-traded funds, the institutional adoption, the corporate adoption, the penetration into markets in traditional asset classes like bonds and convertible and preferred shares, that Bitcoin is playing a role that is far beyond what I think even the original parents might have envisioned it growing into.
Awesome. Yep, my name is Ross Edwards. I'm actually a postgraduate researcher at Queen's University of Belfast looking at Bitcoin mining and energy efficiency. I think currently what we see within Bitcoin is it's been growing massively over the past several years. So it's very important to understand the growth profile, as Paul said there. So I think the most important thing to bring in is sort of like those halving cycles in the institutional adoption. We've seen obviously the Bitcoin ETF growing faster than anything else. So as time goes on, over the next couple of years, we're likely to see the continued growth with the likes of the M2 supply going up as well. So, yeah.
I'm Daniel Prince. I'm the host of the Once Bitten podcast. I actually worked in foreign exchange markets for 18 years. I spent 15 years in Singapore, so I come from the dark side. I came from fiat currency world and found Bitcoin, the bright orange light, and have been studying it since, probably 2015, I say, started falling down the rabbit hole. Started the podcast in 2020, and it's been very interesting coming from those financial markets to see actually how long it's taken for Wall Street, in air quotes, to get up to speed and to start adopting Bitcoin. Obviously, Michael Saylor is probably the best known spokesperson for this with what he's been doing in MicroStrategy, now Strategy. But with all of that comes concerns, which I think we're probably going to start touching on now. Yes, it's great to see big names giving, lending credence to what we've been ridiculed for buying for many years. Now seems as though it's in the newspaper headlines all of the time. It's on CNN, it's on Squawk Box. Everybody's talking about it. And so you might feel, well, I've been vindicated, especially with your friends and family that have been pointing fingers at you, calling you crazy idiots for the last however long that you've been buying Bitcoin. But as alluded to, there's a deeper worry that I think many of us share on this panel. So I'll hand it back to Robin and we can get into that discussion.
Maybe before, I think this is an extremely interesting discussion, how the natural progression of Bitcoin, that everyone can buy it, like it's permissionless, not only plebs but also institutions can buy it, which is, I think Jeff Booth said it, it's the worst thing about Bitcoin is that your enemy can also have it. How do you look at the ETFs, the FASB rulings, the institutional adoption? How does this change Bitcoin, or how did this change Bitcoin since 2020? Let's get directly there.
Yeah, okay. I just got some figures actually from Venice.ai, which I think is slightly better than ChatGPT for privacy reasons. I asked it, how many spot Bitcoin ETFs are there currently available? There are 12, and they were greenlit in January 2024 in the US. That's where they are. As of the latest data, the total holdings of all Bitcoin ETFs amount to approximately 1.12 million Bitcoin tied up in Bitcoin ETFs. Based on the current Bitcoin price of approximately $108,000, that is $121.2 billion of Bitcoin that is now being held in what we would say are centralized hands. We don't know how they're holding them, where they're holding them. Are they on Coinbase? Are they in multi-sig arrangements? Are they being rehypothecated? Because none of the math seems to have it doesn't work out over the last year and a half that they've been stacking this Bitcoin. And this is just the ETFs. This isn't talking about how much MicroStrategy has bought, or Metaplanet, or any of these other new companies that are now being created, like Jack Mallers 21. Just literally a company being created, not to offer goods or services or value into the economy, but to just drain money out of the debt market so they can buy Bitcoin, which is weird. Why are we not having discussions about this? It's very easy to cheer and look at this number go up, but are we really here for that? Are we really here to watch our number go up in euro sticker price or dollar sticker price, or are we here for the parallel economy?
How do you look at that, Claire?
Well, I definitely have some concerns as well, for sure. But I also think that it's a part of the process. And like you said, the best thing about Bitcoin is it's for everybody. But the worst thing about Bitcoin, it's for everybody as well. But I think what the most important thing is that we can't really stop that flow. And we do also need that to become the Bitcoin standard. Like we also need to shift the entire economy into the Bitcoin standard. So I think there's a balance between that. But I think the most important thing is instead of addressing those concerns directly, is onboarding more real people into Bitcoin. So as I said before, our risk profile has completely changed, and it's no longer, is Bitcoin going to survive? It's now, how much of that 21 million is going to be held by real people, or how much of it is going to be held by big corporations and ETFs and things like that. And I think that's something that we all have to answer for ourselves.
Paul, I'm really interested. How do you look at the convergence between, we like that Bitcoin is getting into more hands, and obviously Michael Saylor and Strategy, they made a great job in explaining to people why Bitcoin, and a lot of people bought because of them. I'm one of them. And I got into Bitcoin because of Michael Saylor, basically. But then we also don't want only institutions buying, and especially this cycle, it feels like institutions are buying and retail is completely asleep when we look at all the Google Trends, YouTube searches, and all the metrics where we can see a little bit of retail folks. How do you look at that kind of differentiation?
Sure. So just background, I was a financial advisor in the U.S. for 20 years. So I worked with regular people saving for their retirement and managing the money in retirement. And I worked with a large institutional, investors who had ETFs. And I have no love lost for those centralized financial authorities and aggregators of capital. And yet that's the world we live in. So the fact that they are moving into this asset class comes with positives, and it comes with concerns, as you pointed out, Daniel. But it's reality. The other side of that reality is, while they're growing tremendously, most retail financial advisors still can't even offer them to their clients. So we are at the infancy, even in those products, of advisors being able to add them into portfolios. Most institutions won't let advisors do that. No firm that I ever worked for would allow me to have the portfolio that I have on their balance sheet. They would perceive it to be way too risky. So it's still at its infancy. And it's just part of the transition process, I think. And we do have to monitor and be aware of it. But the best thing we can do is everybody, all the regular people, start getting on board.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think completely agree with everyone there. I think massively what's really important here to understand is that when we're looking at institutional adoption, yeah, perfect, thank you. Institutional adoption is a problem because they're actually buying as much Bitcoin as being produced. So we're going to get to a point in equilibrium, as Michael Saylor said. January 2024, we started the biggest Bitcoin gold rush in history. And probably over the next 10 years, we're going to get to a stage where there's actually only, I think it gets to less than 1 million Bitcoin left to be mined at this stage. We're going to get to a point where there's not enough Bitcoin to be bought. The price potentially will exponentially grow. You're going to get to a stage where it won't make sense to sell your Bitcoin for fiat. It just will not make sense. Yeah, I think the main point here is that we want individuals, to get involved, to understand it. The sovereignty project that we just heard Carl talk about there is fantastic as well. So I think the main thing is, it's understanding. We maybe understand Bitcoin. Do your family understand Bitcoin? Do your friends understand Bitcoin? How are you communicating it? As the island of Ireland, we probably struggle to adapt. We're very negative on everyone, on each other. If someone's doing well, to tell them, we don't really like that. So we seem to drag each other down. So Bitcoin's actually, it sort of forms its own culture, and it's a perfect example of bringing community together like today. So fantastic.
Claire, please.
Yeah, I think the biggest message also in this is that we are in this gap. Like, institutions are coming, but we are in this gap. And a lot of people who are, surrounded by financial advisors or buying through financial advisors, they haven't bought yet. So we do have this opportunity where, for the first time in history, where normal people can get into an asset before the institution. So let's take advantage of that.
Front running is illegal if you're an institution, but you can all do it legally.
I want to get with Daniel, what do you think is the biggest threat from more and more institutions buying, and the buying power of Bitcoin is centralizing there and not at the individual level?
I think it's an attack on the narrative of Bitcoin just being a store of value rather than a medium of exchange. I mean, it's a peer-to-peer cash settlement. This is what we're here for. I think, who told me last night? It might have been Mike, it might have been Knut. The strategy tweet about Pizza Day was very concerning. It just seems very off the cuff, but like, you provide pizza for your workers, your employees on Bitcoin Pizza Day. We used fiat. What the hell? This is one of the leading voices in Bitcoin. And, where's the narrative switched from wait until Apple release a Bitcoin Lightning wallet as just part of everyday app that is there on your phone? Let's get the hands of that into 8 billion people. That's being switched to Bitcoin's a store of value. And this is very, very concerning, because without us using Bitcoin and without us interacting in the economy and talking to the merchants and the everyday people as to the importance of Bitcoin, money for the people, by the people. Let's get back to the basics here. Like I said, the headlines are being stolen. The headlines are being written by the powers that control the narrative. And this is, again, another concern I have is the rise at the moment of these companies that I talked about earlier just to accrue Bitcoin. But now lending is being offered to you, the holders of Bitcoin. The siren song of, you don't need to sell your Bitcoin. You can lend it. You can lend this pristine collateral. You can lend your Bitcoin to me. I will give you fiat, and you have to pay me 12% interest on that fiat whilst I hold your Bitcoin. Where does the fiat come from? Where does the fiat come from behind that person who's offering you the loan? They're probably getting it straight from liquidity from Wall Street, who have direct access to the printing press. So you're going to be paying interest on fake fiat currency, which Carl talked about earlier, while somebody else holds your Bitcoin. And then when the price starts fluctuating, which it does, you're going to get margin called and you're going to lose your Bitcoin. So this is something else that you've got to take very, very close attention to. Just get it back to basics. It's a medium of exchange, and that's what we've got to really start having these conversations about.
That's a really good point, and I think Jeff Booth is really big on that whole topic. If Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it also fails as a store of value. How do you look at that, Paul, when we look at medium of exchange of Bitcoin and how necessary it is for the whole story, and how dangerous this borrow against your Bitcoin, just give the institutions all the Bitcoin and you keep the fiat?
Well, I think it can be both. And it should be both. You know, if we're talking about Bitcoin maturing, so who's raised a teenager here? They've made choices that we didn't agree with. They went through a process that was very painful and very difficult. And ultimately, the question is, did we instill the proper values? Did we give them a philosophy and an orientation to life to ultimately contribute value to life, to the people around them? Or do we instill in them the values of extraction? And that's ultimately the core issue that we have in the fiat economy, which is a system built on extraction of your time, energy, and your labor. But we're always going to have to contribute value. And ultimately, I think that's going to be the big fight in this transition as we mature through this teenage stage, is this going to develop into a mature, wise, entity that has values, and those values are going to depend upon all of us to live up to them and to contribute value, and not just see Bitcoin as a way to extract value and get what's mine while I can out of the system and live apart from everybody else. I mean, if you want to live off the grid, that's fine, but we still have to contribute value, and it's ultimately the values that are going to matter.
Interesting. The values of Bitcoin is really interesting because there's so many different things in Bitcoin, and we all portray our own values onto Bitcoin, and they kind of mirror us. How do you look at the values of Bitcoin and how important it is that we not only form like, oh, it's money and we use it as that, but also we're really trying to shape a revolution, a paradigm shift here?
Yeah, well, I think Simon Dixon explains our current world situation really in a really interesting way, where we have Bitcoin that's proof of work, and we have the US dollar, which is proof of weapons. And so I think when we come through this value system is that a lot of people in the world today, most people, are really wanting to shift out of that system. Like, we don't want to be perpetually working 9 to 5 in a cubicle, to pay taxes into a system that's really going and getting us all involved in foreign wars and all of these kind of things. So I think that those kind of moral human values are going to come through the Bitcoin system for sure.
Interesting. Ross, I'm interested in how you look at the medium exchange and how important this is for the overall Bitcoin story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think medium exchange is difficult right now because we have this infant stage or this teenager stage that we're looking to progress through. But I think the real reason here that we need to understand is that we need a base rate. So if you look at monetary policy for the past 100 years, generally we'd be pegged to silver back in the 19th century, we pegged to gold during the 20th century. We need a peg. Bitcoin as a strategic reserve would become that peg, but currently there's nothing to value it against properly that we can create a peg. Like, when we say one Bitcoin is 10 kilograms of gold, 20 kilograms of gold, do we say one Bitcoin is $100 million, $5 million? I think getting to the point where you can actually use it of a medium exchange is where we're all confident that it's going to be growing probably at 20 or 30% a year based on monetary supply, but that should start to tail off, especially as Bitcoin mining gets more and more competitive, as we get less and less Bitcoin left to mine. So I think at some stage, it could be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, we'll get to a point where we're able to peg Bitcoin effectively and efficiently against assets, whether that's the entire real estate market, parts of different infrastructure being built. The current Bitcoin energy infrastructure is growing. It's probably the fastest growing energy infrastructure in the entire world right now. It's in Ethiopia, all over Africa, North America, Texas are doing absolutely fantastic work as well. So Bitcoin's actually forming the backbone of the entire world energy system, and a lot of people don't even understand that at this stage, but that's where my research actually aligns. And particularly just to briefly talk about that, We're looking at wind curtailment, and that's excess wind in Ireland that's not being utilised, and we can actually use Bitcoin mining here to make wind energy more efficient and actually power our grid better. So.
Bitcoin mining also is interesting because it is also very institutionalized already, and in like 4 or 5 big pools, and there's like a really big miners. How do you look at the same risk that we are now talking with buying Bitcoin also at the institutional level for having the Bitcoin miners and the templates of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've read lots of stories about 2010 when I'm probably running around playing football as a teenager. But people were mining Bitcoin on PlayStation 3s, on the strangest devices. You could pull what would be probably millions and millions of dollars out of a PlayStation 3 now that couldn't probably power anything at this stage. So yeah, I think the ASICs miners, there's a lot of new technology coming into Bitcoin mining that's going to make it even more efficient. It'll go under 10 joules per terahash. It will become difficult, and I don't really understand how individuals can get involved, but the likes of maybe governments or institutions that have already been involved in the Bitcoin mining space can help to make this more green, more sustainable, and make it that we can actually have an encompassed economy out of the back of this.
Interesting. For the second half of the last half of the talk, I want to focus on the maturing in the future. How we can now we have the current state. We've talked how we got here and what are the concerns that we have on ownership side, but also on Bitcoin mining. Let's start with Daniel. How do you see Bitcoin maturing in the next 5-10 years? What are the next stages? And maybe also important for the people here, what can they contribute to making that Bitcoin shift as good as possible and driving it in a good direction, not in a bad one?
Well, we've got a very a watershed moment coming up. For those of you that earn in euros, who's aware of the CBDC coin that's coming out in October? Hands up. You know what Christine Lagarde is planning for the euro? So your medium of exchange is about to change whether you like it or not. You're going to get rugged. Your euros, and how are they going to price them? To your point earlier, or to your point, what's it going to be worth? They're going to pull a number out of the air. Like one CBDC digital euro is equivalent to X amount of your actual euros, which you spend your time and energy to earn. You put your time, energy, value and skills into the marketplace to earn this euro. In October, that could be worthless or phased out. You've gone through this before. The Irish pound. Who remembers that? Does anybody still talk about it? It's gone completely. This is a real concern. And this isn't, Holland, Belgium, France, Spain. We have hundreds of millions of people facing this, months away. So I can't tell you what's going to happen with Bitcoin in regard to that in 5 years' time. How are you going to price Bitcoin against the digital euro? Or are they going to price it for you? Are they going to come out with this number? And how are they going to get you to make the transition? I imagine, first of all, they're going to give you a different exchange rate. They're going to dangle the carrot. If you change your euros now download the CBDC app, here's the exchange rate you can exchange now. That lasts for 2 weeks. And then after that, it's going to drop by 10%. 2 weeks later, it's going to drop by 10%. If you want your welfare, if you want your child benefits, whatever it is, your health pay, you have to switch because that's the only way you're going to get it. That is all going to be done now in the digital euro, in the CBDC. So how you value that against Bitcoin? I have no idea. None.
Yeah, even just to add on that, it's difficult. Yeah, just to add on Daniel's point there, it's difficult to talk about the future, especially in finance. Like we know in the financial world, everything's changing. Things can change at the drop of a hat. Donald Trump, God knows what he's going to say on Sunday. But it really is a crazy world out there in finance. So more to the point, if we look over the past 5 years, the euro, the Canadian dollar, the American dollar, the Kuwaiti dinar, they've all declined by about 90% in the past 5 years versus Bitcoin. That trend's likely to continue. Over the next 5 years, we could see that fall by another 80%. So we're going to get to a point where paper money is literally worthless. You'll see that in Argentina. We've already seen that. You can see that during World War II. You've got all the economies collapsed every single year. The French, the German mark. We've heard the stories. We've read the history. And it looks like we're coming to a similar point.
Yeah. So no one knows, but it can be terrifying what is going to happen with CBDCs and all centralized currencies. But I think we have to have the understanding and the awareness. And I don't think it has to be that complicated, because it's really just as simple. If money is simply a technology to exchange or store value between its creators, all of us in this room, then how can a government create money out of nothing? That makes no sense. And if more people will begin to understand that, you can realize that that's the power we need to take away, because that's the power, that's the force that is stealing from all of us. And if we do that, then we can be, and I say in my book, loving resistance fighters against those forces, all right, which are going to steal our sovereignty and our wealth from us. And, you know, who knows how it's going to play out? Again, exactly what this teenager is going to grow up into. But if we return to the values, the character traits that all of us need to exhibit as we do as we live our lives and our financial transactions, then at some point, and I don't know whether it's 5 years or 50 years or 500 years from now, I think we can do what that meme says of fix the money to fix the world, but I think there's a gap in there. Just fixing the money is not going to fix the world. It's going to take all of us and our values to then be able to move towards fixing the world. But that's really what the project is all about, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, as we said before, we are in this period of this gap. And we have to also, I think the problem is sometimes we try to view Bitcoin through the lens of our current understanding. And it's really like trying to explain TikTok and Instagram to somebody who's still playing Worm on their Nokia. And they just, like, we just don't have any context for it. So part of being a Bitcoiner is also being able to hold that space of the unknown. We don't yet have context for what Bitcoin is for. But I think this is also the argument of why it's really important to become a medium of exchange, the CBDC argument, because if it's just a store of value and it's just held by governments, you know, like the majority of gold is held by sovereign wealth funds and governments and family offices and things like that, then for the rest of humanity, it's just, they're just issuing these CBDCs which they can control and print at will and really have no value. So it's so important for us in this period of the gap that we stake our claim in whatever the future holds for Bitcoin, that we at least have our own stake in that world, rather than having to rely on our politicians to do right by us, which has never really gone that well, to be honest.
I'll just add, you know, use cases develop because there's a need. And different cultures and different societies and different places on the globe have different needs. Many of us in the developed West don't have a problem with a medium of exchange. If you live in Africa, you have a problem with a medium of exchange. So it's a very useful technology for that. You have less of an issue with store of value. In the West, we have a major issue with store of value. Perhaps the silver lining with the CBDC is people will begin to see is, I have a need for a medium of exchange apart from the one that the government is giving us. And it'll only take the next COVID crisis where they use the enforcement mechanisms and the control mechanisms from the CBDC maybe to wake a few more people up. But guess what? You're in this room, so you can wake up before that.
It's interesting because I think like 2020, a lot of people came into Bitcoin. A lot of people woke up. This is like when I ask when are you getting orange, but 2020 is one of the times where a lot of people actually came into Bitcoin. Maybe CBDCs and those adoption waves of fiat currencies actually wake people a little bit more up to like, oh, I don't really own that money. I don't really have control of it. How do you look at that, Ross?
Yeah, well, like I would definitely think orange is the new green. You know, the US dollar has destroyed their currency for years. It's a continuation trend. So I think the main thing is to really understand where are we going and where can we go together. You know, it's not about bringing in corporations. Like I've worked in financial institutions. You know, they're happy to buy this asset and hold it for 100 years. Like they'll do that and they'll never move. But to create a medium of exchange, to create an economy, we need some way to exchange for goods and services. You know, we all have our skill sets, we all have our passions. We all have, the thing we want to do, we want to wake up and do every day. We want to get paid for that. We want to get paid for that appropriately. So I think it's just finding the balance there.
Just I want to build on something from the talk before, Carl, which he delivered a great speech there. Looking forward to his workshop at 4 o'clock. The fiat currency and the national debt that we are being forced to pay. So where does that money come from? The government will issue bonds to the central bank, the ECB in the case of the euro, or the Bank of England if you're in the UK, or the Federal Reserve if you're in the US. This money gets printed by those guys. It's just digital. It's like keystrokes. They send it to the government, and then they promise them to pay back the interest at 10%, let's say, over 10, 15, 20 years, however long those government bonds are. So that money has come from nowhere, and we are the ones that are paying the tax to help pay it back. So if you think the guys that can create the money, whenever they want, why would they ever want it back? With interest. They don't need it. They don't care for it. What they really want are assets and mineral-rich lands. That's the whole game here. That's the fiat fuckery that we are fighting. And taking self-sovereignty, please don't have Bitcoin on an exchange, because if you're on an exchange, you are Mr. Smith in all capitals. It's not your Bitcoin, it's not your account. That's why you need the hardware wallets. And this is, it creates a need, as Paul was saying. These hardware wallets have been around now for a long time. There's Bull Bitcoin over there, and go and have a workshop with Teo. Find out how you can start buying Bitcoin KYC free, and how you can start storing that offline in a self-sovereign manner. So you're not contributing any more to this system. This doesn't happen overnight. This is just a learning process that we all have to go through. And the materials are there. Paul's book is out there. My podcast is out there. There's other podcasters here. There's other companies here. All it takes are questions and humility and a willing to learn.
I think those were a great... I wanted to do a last round where once last message before we end up this panel. And I think this from Daniel, it was already very good in that regard. Ross, do you have one final message for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Buy Bitcoin. I think it's as simple as that, really.
You stole mine.
Yeah, no, just to add, so I'm an active investor. I've been trading for years, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. But I have a lot of experience in financial markets. I've worked for some of the big companies in London, New York as well, and Wall Street. The main takeaway, I think, is just we're taught that finance is difficult. It can't be understood, but there's a reason that we're taught that. And the reason that we're taught that is that we don't understand it. And when we don't understand it, as Carl alluded to, we need to overstand. What that means is we need to be on top. We need to be sovereign. We need to be on top of our own currency. We need to manage our own finances. And together you do that. You build a network. It's, if you own millions and millions of assets, you're not doing it alone. You have a network there. So I think just most importantly, network today. Don't be afraid to speak to anyone. And yeah, have a great day. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
So I liken much of what's been described here about the governments as a fire-breathing dragon. It's a war machine. It's a dragon that steals our time and energy and labor. And the fuel of its fire is fiat currency. So if we begin to starve this dragon of its fuel, whether as a medium of exchange or as a store of value, then less and less fire will it breathe to burn all of us.
My final message is also buy Bitcoin for sure. But I think, as I said, I'm also a financial astrologer, and we are in a time where the age of personal responsibility is upon us, and we've been led into a space where we outsource every single thing in our lives to an expert to do it for us. And this has been an absolute scam. And so now is really the time to take back, educate yourself, whether it's your health, whether it's educating your children, whether it's your finances. Every single aspect of our life that we outsource to experts, we need to reclaim that. And we can first start by buying Bitcoin and reclaiming your own personal financial sovereignty. So that's where it's at.
Then thank you so much. I think it was an amazing panel, and yeah, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, give it up for those amazing speakers.